On May 22, 2023, Russia's invasion of Ukraine took an interesting turn. Now Russia was being invaded. Although attacks on Russian soil have become commonplace, including a small land crossing over here 2 months earlier, this was different in its scope and impact. The target was Belgorod Oblast, just north of Kharkiv. Belgorod is a junction for Russia's supply lines and would play a major role in any future Russian offensive in the north, if the Kremlin ever gets that far. The responsible party, or parties, is in dispute between the countries at war. Two anti-Putin groups made up of Russian citizens, the moderate Freedom of Russia Legion and the far-right Russian Volunteer Corps, claimed the attack as a joint operation. Credit claiming like this is common because organizations want money and volunteers to flock to them, and attacks are good advertisement. Russia claims it was Ukraine all along without much evidence to support that assertion. The United States distanced itself from the operation, stating that it does not support strikes inside of Russia, though Russia alleges to have discovered American-made vehicles, but not necessarily American-supplied, on the ground afterward. Later, the leader of the Russian Volunteer Corps would admit to using American vehicles, but refuse to explain his procurement methods. An advisor for Zelensky said that Ukraine had nothing to do with it. The attack originated in Ukraine, though, and it is difficult to believe that the groups would not have coordinated with Kyiv for the attack. The Freedom of Russia Legion denied this, though both groups are a part of Ukraine's official international legion. Moreover, take a look at the exact language that the advisor used to explain where the groups acquired their materiel from. He said that the tanks used in the operation are sold at any Russian military surplus store. This is a tongue-in-cheek reference to how Putin explained where the local resistance groups acquired their weapons for the seizure of Crimea in 2014. Those local resistance groups, of course, turned out to be the little green men that Putin had ordered into the country. Thus, we are going to assume that there was coordination between Russian partisans and the Ukrainian government for the rest of this analysis, which is consistent with the conventional independent interpretations. How much military and economic aid the groups are receiving is less clear, but also not particularly important for our purposes. As for the attack itself, you would think that the border would be well guarded. However, the reason for the raid's success is that Russia left it understaffed, and the troops that were stationed there were fresh recruits. As a result, the invaders could press for a while until Russia redeployed its forces to repel the assault. The Kremlin's thinking here was that Ukraine would not risk upsetting its international partners by invading Russian soil. Given that assumption, a real security detachment to border regions was unnecessary, but Ukraine figured out a solution to that problem: get other Russians to do it, and perhaps arm them to further that cause. And whatever their connections to Ukraine were, as Russia insists exist, the plausible deniability of an alternative flag was good enough. In terms of the strategic benefits, the immediate effect might not be much. Taking a closer look at the map, the thrust of the attacks occurred here, here, and here, the closest still 30 kilometers from Belgorod city. A drone strike hit there around the same time, but it appears that it was not enough to seriously impact Russia's supply chain logistics, especially because the brunt of the attack occurred north of Kharkiv, and the September 2022 counterattack pushed the front lines about 110 kilometers eastward. The fog of war as it is, we don't know exactly what the casualty and equipment exchange looked like on the ground, but whatever happened appears minor, so it is unclear how it would affect the timing of Ukraine's upcoming counterattack. On the political front, Ukraine earned a short-term win by bumping the fall of Bakhmut out of the news cycle for a bit. But to be fair, although Kyiv prefers headlines like these, the Ukrainian army is still pressuring along Bakhmut's north and south flanks, so Russia remains in a precarious position. And regardless, anyone paying serious attention to the war knows what is happening in Bakhmut, so the media benefit only works on the least important group. Instead, the assault's real benefit to Ukraine will accrue in the long run. Remember the defensive algorithm that we discussed a while back? This explored how a defender should allocate its resources when the attacker will see those decisions and then pick a vector of attack. The short version is that the defender should try to equalize all of its vulnerabilities. So if the default probability of Ukrainian victory looked like this, then distributing soldiers like this would be a good idea, thereby preventing the attacker from exploiting any weak spots. Thus, what ultimately determines where the attacker goes is the marginal private information that it has about the chances of winning at any given spot. Belgorod put that principle in action. Russia thought that the border was fine because Ukraine did not want to upset its international partners. But Ukraine had privately worked out a solution to the problem, and therefore by proxy decided to head north. The trade-off for Ukraine is that doing this has revealed its private information. Consequently, Ukraine will not have the opportunity to exploit this element of surprise again. However, Russia will have to reallocate its troops. After all, continuous proxy attacks on the border hurts Moscow, as repeatedly evacuating nearby cities is unsustainable. But that is a large amount of new territory to cover, particularly given that Russia had to mobilize in September 2022 just to cover the front lines the Kremlin was holding strictly within Ukraine. All told, it basically doubles the distance. You can see the issue. Let's reset things for a moment. Securing the border means reducing Russia's capacity along the front lines within Ukraine, and therefore raises Ukraine's probability of victory in its upcoming counterattack, wherever it chooses to go. That is why we should think of the raid as a shaping attack, a move intended to alter the battle space in a favorable manner. If there is one thing that Ukraine has excelled at during this war, it is those shaping operations. The reason that September 2022's counterattack east of Kharkiv succeeded was not so much about the assault there, so much as locking down Kherson and forcing Russia to commit to that city's defense. 2 months later, the counterattack on Kherson never even had to occur. Ukraine's siege put Russia in an unwinnable spot, and thereby forced Russia's retreat south of the Dnipro. With that in mind, what we have seen in Belgorod is not the plan, but rather the premise of a deeper Ukrainian plot, whose resolution we might see soon. If you want to know more about the war, you'll love my book that investigates the many possible causes of it. Check below for more information on that. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Take care. It is time for the International Relations Misplay of the Week, and the winner is me! In the video on the defensive algorithm, I included a joke about how all of the aggregated predictions for a counterattack that you see floating around the internet look something like this. The irony, of course, is that the one place that I did not mark was Russia. And while this is not the actual counterattack, I still think this counts as a whoopsie!